All right, welcome. Today, we are going to crack open the official AWS Generative AI certification exam. But here's the thing, we're not just studying for a test. The real mission here is to pull these questions apart to really understand the core, real-world principles of generative AI. You know, the stuff you actually need to know to build and manage these amazing systems. Okay, let's get into it.
So, the first big question is, what does mastery of generative AI even look like according to AWS? This exam, it's more than just a list of services to memorize. It's really a blueprint for understanding the key concepts, the real-world problems you're going to face, and, super importantly, the ethical guardrails for building with AI today. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take real exam questions and break them down, not just to get the right answer, but to dig into the fundamental ideas behind the questions. This is all about building that gut feeling for how this stuff works, not just memorizing facts to pass a test.
So let's start at square one. If you want to master generative AI, you've got to learn to speak its language. This whole section is about the fundamental vocabulary, the absolute building blocks of how these large language models, or LLMs, think and operate.
First up, the token. Think of a token as the basic unit of currency for an LLM. It could be a whole word, maybe just part of a word, sometimes even just one punctuation mark. And here is the absolute key insight you need to get. Tokens are directly connected to cost. The more tokens your model has to chew on to understand your prompt and generate a response, the more you pay. It's like a meter that's constantly running in the background.
Okay, so if tokens are the currency, then the context window is the size of your wallet. This is a super crucial concept. It's the absolute maximum number of tokens, both what you put in and what you get out, that a model can juggle at one time. If your prompt is too long, or the conversation goes on for too long, it just won't fit. The model literally runs out of memory and forgets what you were talking about at the beginning.
And this leads us to one of the most powerful, kind of mind-bending ideas in AI, embeddings. Ever wonder how a model just knows that the relationship between king and queen is like the one between man and woman? It's through embeddings. They're basically rich numerical fingerprints for any concept. And they're not just for text. You can create embeddings for images, audio, you name it. This allows you to build these incredible search apps that understand ideas across totally different kinds of data.
Okay, so we've got the lingo down. Now let's see how these fundamentals actually come together in the real world. We're going to focus on Amazon Bedrock, which is AWS's big service for using these foundation models, and we'll tackle some of the most common problems you're going to run into.
Here is a classic business problem. Imagine this. You've got this super powerful chatbot, but its personality is, well, it's generic. It's bland. You need it to sound like your company. Maybe that's super professional, or maybe it's witty and fun. So how do you do that? Your first move, and usually the fastest and cheapest, is prompt engineering. This is the art of crafting the perfect instructions for your model. This can mean giving it a few examples of exactly what you want. That's a technique called few-shot learning. Or it could be as simple as telling it what role to play, like act as a helpful guide for a complete beginner. The big takeaway is that you can steer the model's behavior just by getting really good at writing prompts. But, you know, sometimes a great prompt just isn't going to cut it. Let's look at this two-part problem. First, your model has no idea what your company's specialized, complex jargon means. And second, it needs to be able to answer questions using private, up-to-the-minute company data. This sets up the single biggest strategy debate in generative AI today. And here are your two main options, fine-tuning and RAG. Think of it like this. Fine-tuning is like sending your model back to school to get a PhD in a specific subject. You retrain it on a specialized dataset to teach it a brand new skill, like understanding complex scientific terms. RAG, on the other hand, is like giving that model an open book test. You're not changing its brain, but you are giving it access to a library of external documents, so it can look up the answers. It's perfect for grounding the model in your private data. Let's just quickly walk through how RAG works, because it's a total game changer. So, a user asks a question, the system instantly shoots over to a knowledge base and grabs the most relevant documents. Then, it bundles up the original question and those documents into a new, supersized prompt. Finally, it sends that whole package to the LLM, which now has all the fresh context it needs to give a really accurate, up-to-date answer. So you've built your app, it's customized, it's grounded in your data. But is it actually any good? How do we measure performance? This brings us to our next section, which is all about how the exam tests your knowledge of evaluation.
Check out this scenario. You're not just classifying if a picture is a cat or a dog. You're translating complex text. A simple % correct score is totally useless here, right? You need a specialized tool for this specific job.
And this is why knowing your metrics is non-negotiable.
For translation, you'd use a metric called BLUE, which compares the AI's output to a bunch of high-quality human translations. For summarization, you'd use something called ROUGE. For a simple classification task, you just use accuracy. Using the wrong metric is like trying to measure temperature with a ruler. Sure, you'll get a number, but that number will be completely meaningless.
And don't forget, quality isn't just about being right. Runtime efficiency is a huge business metric. I mean, if your super smart chatbot takes 20 seconds to come up with an answer, your users are gone. Latency, or the average response time, is often just as crucial as the quality of the answer itself.
This brings us to our final and you could argue most important section, using AI responsibly. It's one thing to build these powerful models. It's a whole other thing to make sure they're fair, safe, and secure. This is a massive focus on the AWS exam, and for very, very good reason.
Let's just look at this example. This isn't some theoretical problem. This is a real-world failure with serious human consequences. When an AI model shows prejudice like this, you have to understand why. What is going on under the hood? The answer here is sampling bias. This is what happens when the data you trained your model on doesn't look like the real world it's going to operate in. If the data set was mostly made up of people from one ethnic group, the model is going to be terrible and deeply unfair when it sees people from groups it wasn't trained on. The model is just a mirror, reflecting the bias that was already in the data.
So what do you do about it? Well, you have to be proactive. You have to hunt for these imbalances in your data before you even start training. You have to constantly check your model's performance, not just overall, but for all kinds of different groups. And you should absolutely use purpose-built tools like AWS's own SageMaker Clarify to help you find and fix these issues.
And bias is just one piece of this responsible AI puzzle. The exam also hits on other critical challenges. You've got plagiarism, which is all about the ethics of using AI-generated content. You've got jailbreaking, where bad actors try to trick a model into breaking its own safety rules. And then you've got hallucinations, which is when the model just confidently makes stuff up that sounds true but is totally false. A real AI strategy has to plan for all of these things.
And that's really the final thought I want to leave you with. As we've seen from digging into these exam questions, building with generative AI is about so much more than just code. It's about speaking the language, mastering the tools, measuring what actually matters, and, most critically, building the ethical guardrails to make sure these incredibly powerful technologies are used safely and wisely. Thanks for tuning in.